Good evening and welcome to the Australian Wool Traceability Hub demonstration. Thanks for your time and opportunity. My name's Stephen Hill. I'm the Supply Chain Initiatives Manager here at AWI. John Billings from AWI will take you through the presentation tonight, giving you a detailed introduction to the hub, as we like to call it. I won't steal any of his thunder, other than to stress the importance of traceability or commercial traceability to market access for wool going forward. And obviously in the case of an emergency animal disease response, bale tracking is critical for isolating and mitigating any potential impacts and get the wool moving as quick as possible. As a bit of housekeeping, you'll see at the bottom of your screen there's a chat icon. We'll be taking questions at the end of the formal presentation. So if you click on that and type in some questions, we'll look to answer them, as I say, at the end of the chat. So without any further ado, I'll hand it over to you, John. Many thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. So yeah, John Billings is my name. I'm the AWTH administrator and one of the members of the working group that did the development of the program over the last 12 months or so. So what I'd like to do is just, I guess, give you a brief overview of the background behind the development of the Traceability Hub, what it is within the industry, I guess, brought it to fruition in the first instance, who's governing it and overseeing it. Then I'll run through some of the features and functions of the platform. And then at the end, I would do a hands-on demonstration from the test system to show you exactly how some of the screens and that hang together, so you'll get a better idea, especially from a grower's perspective, I guess, what the benefits are and what the value-adding propositions are for people to get on board and participate. So in the first instance, I'll just share my screen and we'll get the presentation underway. So Australian Wool Traceability Hub. So why traceability? So the platform that's been put forward has basically got three aspects to it. One, as Steve mentioned before, is the importance of biosecurity and being able to respond effectively and efficiently to an emergency animal disease outbreak. And this is basically put forward on the back of some work that Wool Producers Australia did into establishing the need for this type of platform in order to mitigate the impact of any EAD outbreak on the wool industry itself, and also to provide assurance to government and to our overseas trading partners that we can respond effectively and efficiently if an outbreak occurs and hopefully restore commercial trade as soon as we can. From that then comes a market access part of the platform, which allows us to, I guess, provide traceability and commercial traceability and chain of confidence back to farm source in order to provide provenance. And that's a key criteria that our brand partners overseas have been asking for and wanting to connect through to the industry and pull that information through to their brands. The third part of it is then once you've established that traceability connection is the efficiencies that allows in terms of streamlining processes and reducing cost and ultimately improving trust and reliability in the data that's flowing along that supply chain, because we can make sure that everything's checked and verified. And so people have confidence in the information that they're trading on. So what will it do? In its simplest terms, it will strengthen the confidence and reliability and efficiency of key information and transfer needs within the Australian wool supply chain from grower to processor. So we're solely talking about a domestic supply chain at the moment, not going offshore. It's purely from yourselves, growers, through until early stage processor within the domestic market. So what will it do? So the key deliverable that we've been asked to put forward is a national digital traceability system for the domestic wool supply chain. So like I said, it's domestic supply chain. Initially, that supports Australian Wool's emergency animal disease response plan, which is established under what's called the AWTH plan by Animal Health Australia. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, I encourage everybody in the wool industry to at least log on to the Animal Health Australia website and have a look at the AWTH plan, because it outlines very clearly what will happen in the wool industry if there's an EAD outbreak, but it's also any livestock. So, cattle, sheep, bird flu is a case in point. In the case of the avian flu outbreaks that have happened here recently in Victoria. So it's all outlined in the AWTH plan. So I encourage people to read it. The second aspect is this end-to-end traceability model that we're talking about for wool bale movements from grower processor in return. So it's a two-way traceability model up and down the domestic supply chain. And that includes opportunities for growers like yourselves to promote and showcase their business in terms of value-adding farm attributes, quality schemes that you may be members of, ethical practices around mulesing and so forth, carbon credits, all those sorts of things that can add value to your products as it flows down the supply chain. In addition to that, there's controls for brokers and exporters and so forth who are participating in the platform to control how that information is presented, and also monitor the data to make sure that it's being uploaded and used in the way in which it's intended. And another aspect that we're looking at is, especially from the administrative overheads, mainly from brokers downstream, from brokers to exporters, is some of the overheads and administrative costs that they're incurring in having to support a lot of these integrity schemes. There's a lot of administrative costs and paper shuffling and all sorts of things going on in the background, which we hope that this hub can streamline and add some efficiencies to. So we're looking at putting that on board as well. So how will it be done? So the implementation is to be done before the commencement of the 24-25 selling season, which is basically from tomorrow. And I'm pleased to announce that the Traceability Hub is actually live as of Monday. So we're actually up and running, and we've got a number of subscribers already on board and participating. So it's an exciting time for all of us. One of the overarching requirements of putting this platform together that was to be done with minimal cost. And the way we've done that is basically by leveraging a lot of the existing data that's already available within the wool supply chain itself, going from growers right through to sellers, buyers, exporters, and pulling all that information together into the one platform. So we're not duplicating costs or duplicating effort, and keeping everything synchronized so everything is as efficient and as up to date as it can be. We've also looked at utilising software integration between companies like Australian Wool Innovation, AWTA ourselves, and AWIs. Part of that is taking the WoolQ platform as we know it, and it's basically stripped that back and then built the traceability EAD platform on top of that. We're also integrating with the testing services that AWTA provides and AWIC's services, including the wool clip and eSpeci that the wool clip system provides. So we're pulling all that information together as well to make things as efficient and as robust as they can be. All that development work is being funded by those companies. So AWI, AWTA, and AWIC are the organisations that are actually doing the work and covering the costs at this point in time. In order to participate, businesses will need user agreements. Grower clients like yourselves will not need to sign anything specifically, but you'll go through an onboarding process which will expose you to the terms and conditions and things like that are around it. And I'll give a demonstration about how that works in a minute so you can see how that all comes together. Probably the most important thing to realise is it's being done. It's an industry good initiative, so it's being done by industry for industry. And at this point in time, there's no plan to do any cost recovery, so there's no fees being leveraged. Like I said, it's purely being implemented for the benefit of the business, for the benefit of the industry, because we all understand that the EAD response platform is a no-brainer really in providing the securities that offers. So and everybody agrees that it's worth getting on board for that. And then the commercial traceability benefits will flow from that later on. So. An important thing to stress in here too is there's no price data. So we're not actually capturing sale prices, auction prices, private sales. There's no price data in here at all. And the last thing I want to stress is that the property identification code, which comes from your wool classes specification, and I'll cover this in a little bit more detail in a minute, is critical to this process because that provides the link back to your grower properties. And it allows us then to link through to the test certificates when they go into the broker, when the sale lots get put together in a broker's store, and that flows through then to export on the buyers and exporters side. So, but one of the key things I want to stress about this platform is it's opt-in and opt-out. It's completely and utterly up to people who want to participate or not. There's no compulsion to do so. You can participate in the EAD part of the platform and leave traceability to the side, or participate in both. It's entirely up to the people who are on board. From a grower's perspective, you get the opportunity. You can either participate or not participate, because obviously if you don't participate, then you're opting out. If you then come on board and sign up to the platform, then you're participating in the EAD part of the platform by default. And I'll explain to you then how that works through in terms of relationships that you establish with your broker customers, sorry, your broker services, and then how that information flows down the supply chain. So we'll cover that when we do the demo. So in terms of governance and direction, so who's been driving the whole concept? I mean, the whole idea was originally developed by, like I said, by industry for the industry. And the overarching body that's looking after the whole project is called Wool Industries Australia. So that's the national body that's overseeing the project. That comprises members of Wool Testing Authority, AWI, AWTH, the National Council of Brokers, Council of Exporters and Processors, Wool Producers Australia, and wool handlers representing the logistics company. So it's an overarching industry body that's putting this project together. They're responsible for developing the scope and the policies in which the platform's going to deliver, and the functionality and timelines in which we're working to. And obviously looking over the people that are actually doing the development work and any issues that may come from that development work, and ultimately doing the promotion and advocacy in sessions like this to people like yourselves. So the working group itself, like I said, which Steve and myself are involved in, is made up from Wool Innovation, Australian Wool Testing Authority, and AWTH. So that we're the ones doing the actual development work, the software design, customer engagement and communications with people like yourselves, and selling and brokering businesses and buying and exporters as well. And then now that the system is live, it'll be AWTH that is actually doing the maintenance and support of the production system going forward. So we have a help desk service and support system set up, which I'll cover later on in the demonstration as well. So when you reach out through those channels, you'll be connecting directly to AWTH staff, and we'll be the ones supporting you moving forward. One of the other things that we're looking at adding to the platform is what's called the National Farmers Federation Farm Data Code accreditation. And this is a scheme that NFF introduced back in May last year in order to promote the adoption of digital technology, but also ensuring that farmers like yourselves have confidence that the data that you're providing to these types of platforms is being used and managed and shared in a responsible manner. And the benefit of doing this accreditation is it's independently audited and certified. So it's actually the NFF who actually will look at this platform and satisfy themselves that it is doing what it's meant to do in the way that it's meant to do it, and providing those guarantees around your data and how it's being shared and used. So you have confidence in knowing that when that accreditation is achieved, that the platform is being responsible and using and managing your data responsibly. So that's a key accreditation that we're chasing. And we hope to have that. The process has actually already commenced. So we're hoping to have that up and finalised probably within the next month or two. So in terms of what the supply chain traceability looks like, Steve mentioned this from the outset, that the whole purpose of this platform is to monitor bale movements along the domestic supply chain. So in terms of domestic system, this is our phase 1 delivery. So this is what we've put in place as of now that we've gone live. So from the grower side, from your properties through to using those who are using the wool clip application from AWTH, we can capture through the e-specie, bale details, property identification codes and all that through that platform. And you can actually link that directly back to the Traceability Hub, so you don't have to duplicate information between the two. There's a system that allows it to happen automatically in the background, and I'll demonstrate how you connect that when we do the practical demonstration in a minute. So from sharing through to lotting, going through to the broker side, we pick up the e-bale and the property identification codes through the test certificates when the testing's done at the test house. Then delivery post-sale through to buyer, then from buyer through to delivery orders that cover the deliveries of the bales through to dump, through to shipping containers, and then ultimately off to the early stage processes. On the other side of it, we understand that because all this information, all this phase 1 model is being used, like I said, is using the data that's already in the existing wool supply chain. And we know that there are gaps in the traceability of that information because things happen offline or happen in different places. And so there are some gaps in how that information is being tracked at the moment. So the second phase of this project, which is due for delivery in December, is to have a tool for tracking individual bale movements right along the supply chain. And that'll plug all those gaps that are currently there in the traceability model, so that we'll get almost real-time traceability of bales from the time that they basically pressed up and shorn right the way through until the time they hit the early stage processor before they head off overseas to mill. And also part of that phase 2 project is this integrity scheme integration. So like I was saying, trying to get some administrative benefits to some of the manual paper-based systems that are supporting this, some of the quality schemes at the moment. Timeline for completion. So this is the timeline we're working to. So the project was actually launched pretty much this time last year. So I'd like to pass on a thank you to all the people involved in the development work, because it's quite incredible that we've got a national traceability scheme up and running and available for use within 12 months of concept. And again, that's happened with virtually no cost to the industry and in an effective and timely manner. So it's a very notable achievement for the industry to get to this point within 12 months. The concept was launched in a soft launch at the IWTO, the International Wool Textile Organisation conference in Adelaide in April this year. So that's when the first demonstrations were done of the platform to illustrate to industry what it was all about and what the deliverable timelines were going to be. So like I said, we're now in July and we've officially launched the first phase of the Traceability Hub. So it's available for people to jump on board, and you can register after this seminar if you want to. And again, I'll show you part of this process is how that works. And we're hoping to have 30% of buyers and sellers onboarded within this initial launch phase. And then by December 2024, like I said, I had that extra functionality with the API for bale tracking and the integrity scheme, quality scheme integration done as well. So hopefully by this time next year, when we reach the start of the final phase, we'll have more than 90% of wool bales able to be traced through the platform. But ultimately that relies on uptake, and especially from growers like yourselves, because if we don't get traceability back to source, then there's always going to be a step in the chain that's missing. So we encourage growers to get on board and contact their selling agents, their brokers and all that in order to facilitate it. I want to come back to the property identification code for a minute, because like I said, that's a key element of the traceability model. And I want to just mention some things about the adoption and how that flows through. So PIC, or property identification code, is required in order to meet that 25-26 target of 90% of bales tracked through the system. And it is also a requirement for the Chief Veterinary Officer for us to provide it as part of the AWTH plan. And again, that's what I say, I encourage people to go to the animal health website and look up the AWTH plan to see how an EAD response will actually happen and what the effect may be for your own business around properties. Property identification codes, as we know this is the Vic agriculture format here. So it gives you an idea about what the property identification codes look like. I mean, those of you obviously will know them from wool classes species where they've been provided to brokers through that paperwork. So this is the case in point. This is an illustration of the AWIs standard class of specie. And again, the property identification codes are being declared there. So there's a means for that to be provided through to industry, so we can have that traceability model in place. So in terms of what it's needed for, in an EAD response, what will happen is the Chief Vet Officer from each state will, depending on the state in which the outbreak has occurred, will contact the Traceability Hub with a list of property identification codes for affected locations where the outbreaks occurred and a date range of exposure. And so we'll then go into the platform, pull out that information in terms of bale movements and locations across that date range, provide that information back to the Chief Vet, and then they will take that information and decide what it is that they do with it. So they'll be contacting growers like yourselves, affected businesses in terms of brokers and buyers and all that sort of thing, to try and find out where exactly these contaminated bales are sitting, and then what the mitigation strategies are going to be afterwards. So our role is simply just to provide that information to the Chief Vet, and then they'll make a decision about how they use it and respond to it from there on. But the point to make here is if we don't have the PIC, then we can't get that connection back to your properties in order to provide that traceability model. So it's the PIC that connects your growers' farm data to the seller's test certificate and the sale lots when they go through to the broker. And then it's the test certificate that's used that connects the broker's information for the sale lot through to buyers' deliveries, their orders, and through to the processor. So those are the two key parts of information that underpin the traceability model. In terms of pick declarations, so at the moment, you may not be aware, but the pick is being provided automatically to AWTA, the test house, by your selling agents and brokers. And that's because the industry wanted to have a warehouse of these picks in order to provide this traceability model. At the moment, that's running at about 54% on grower fleece lots. So fleece wool, basically original property sale lots, 28% on interlots and 5% on bulk class. So the uptake of that, in order to get to that 90% bale adoption rate, needs to improve. Primarily, obviously, through grower lots and interlots, and bulk class is going to be a bit of a challenge as well. So there's some discussions about how rehandle and bulk class may work. But the point to make here is that the pick declaration remains voluntary at the moment. So it's still a voluntary thing. And we're hoping that we don't have to mandate it in order that the industry can self-regulate its own declaration scheme. So I just want to point out the adoption rates in each state, which are vastly different depending on whereabouts in Australia you're coming from. So you can see in WA, year to date's in the light blue. So they're only got about 23% of adoption for picks on all sale lots. And then on the eastern seaboard, Tassie and Queensland are relatively high, and then drops off into New South Wales and Victoria. You can see there that we've got some work to do then in having that pick adoption rate up to the point where we get that 90% traceability. So in terms of industry data, I'll just gloss over this quickly because it's basically just illustrating in a graphical sense what I've already discussed. So, but from a grower point of view, from your own wool clip, those who are using the wool clip application from AWIs will have the information of their e-species and all that flow through directly through the platform. And like I said, you can create a connection to have that happen in the background. If you're not using wool clip and using manual species, some of the information that's in the platform around mobs and lines and so forth, which I'll show you what that looks like in a minute, won't be available until such time as the testing certificate's done and the bale details come back through from the seller. And that's the first time in which we'll get your pick information back, and then we can connect that back to your property. So that's why we're trying to see how much of as wool clip adoption increases, hopefully that information will be more readily available. It is separate from the issue about e-bale ID. So those who are using e-bales now in shed, that information will still flow through to us through the test certificate and lotting that happens in the broker store, independent of what happens within AWIC's wool clip application. So they're two separate pieces of data, if that makes sense. So we'll still get the e-bale IDs coming through the test certificate when they do their lotting in the seller stores. Post-sale, then on to buyers. So we'll get the combination certificates and deliveries that they're putting together for their mill clients. So those results will come through into the Traceability Hub as well. And in terms of their orders and shipping information, and ultimately the end destination for the delivery. And you'll see when we do the hands-on demonstration in a minute how all this information comes together in the traceability screens. This next screen, I like to call it the Connect 4 screen because it looks like a game of Connect 4. But if I could just work through it just quickly from left to right, it'll make a little bit more sense. So on the left-hand side, you can see here, this area that's outlined is what we call the EAD model. So if you're participating in EAD, all you're doing is providing your information to the hub. It just acts as a data warehouse. Nobody has any access to it or can use it for any other purpose. It just sits there. And then if an EAD outbreak occurs, then we pull that information out and pass it on to the chief vet. Otherwise, it just sits there. You're the only people that have access to your own data. It's not shared with anybody, and it sits there until such time as the vets call on it. So in terms of from your growers' perspective, you'll get to see obviously the e-specie information and so forth, if any of that's been put in there, and your own brand information that comes through from your own profiles when you set them up in the platform. If you're connected to your selling agent, and I'll show you how that works in a minute, then obviously your selling agent will get to see your specie and brand information, but they can also pass on to you the test certificate information and lotting and so forth that they do for the sale lots up until the lots are sold. And then if there's information here, if an exporter is participating or a buyer is participating in the platform, then they only get to see their own order information and they don't get to see anything else downstream from that. On this right-hand side, then, is the traceability model. So there are all sorts of controls to give both the brokers and the exporters control over how the data gets shared up and down the traceability model. So effectively, your selling agent or your broker is like the gatekeeper or the controller in the middle. So they can let information flow down to you as growers, or then they can let information flow upstream to the exporters. And like I say, we're encouraging you as wool growers to have discussions with your own selling agents about what this means for your own business and how they can enable it for it. It's certainly not the role of the Traceability Hub to get involved in those discussions with your own selling agents. That's something for you to discuss directly with them. We've been doing presentations like this to a number of different selling agents for the last couple of months. So most of them should be aware of what the platform's about and can help facilitate that connection with you guys in getting everything on board. In terms of how the sharing works, though, so if a grower then decides, if the seller then wants to share the test certificate information once the testing has been done, so obviously they'll have connection to you as a grower, so they get to see the specialty brand information is already as part of being your selling agent, but then you can get to see the testing and lot information that comes back through your selling agent. If the seller then decides to add to that the exporter's delivery information and so forth that comes downstream, then you'll get to see the lot ownership and the order information and shipping information that comes down. So you get to see basically the whole of the end-to-end delivery traceability model. And then also from the seller side, they can share upstream to their exporter customers information from your properties about brand, the test certificate, lot information, and so on. And that's where the value adding proposition comes in, adding some of the key criteria about your farm attributes, quality scheme membership, those sorts of things. That's where that information is important, because that can then flow upstream to the exporters and help facilitate then the trade of wool offshore to their brand clients. Similarly, from the exporters side, they've got controls about sharing information back downstream to your selling agent and then ultimately onto you as a grower. So again, they can turn on the information and have that the sale and lot information flow back down the traceability timeline as well. And that's illustrated here by these graphics. I'll just skip over this because there's a bit more detail about the actual individual bits or pieces of information that are being shared. I've touched off on most of this already, so I won't harp on any of this, but it's just basically the information, like I said, that's already in the wool industry communications network that's being shared already that we're making use of. So now I'll jump into a demonstration and show you exactly what the platform looks like. So just give me a moment, I'll stop sharing the screen and jump out to the test environment, and we can have a look to see what that looks like. So I'll jump back in and share this next screen with you all. Okay, so this is the Traceability Hub website. So the URL was www.awth.com.au, as you may expect. Now, this is our QA system, so it's our quality scheme. So it's not the live platform, but it's basically exactly the same as what you would see in the live system. So I'll take you through a couple of key features first. There's a general blurb about the features and functions and the history and some videos and so forth. But what I want to point out particularly is this FAQ page. So there's a lot of Q&A stuff that we've tried to put in there. So if there are any questions from growers like yourselves, hopefully you can find some self-help in this model and have some answers for some of the key questions that we think will crop up. Obviously, if we have more of them, we can always add to more of them as we become more familiar with what the regular challenges are for people. Another thing I'd like to point out is this e-learning module. So we've actually put a page in here, which I encourage you to go through and have a look at in your own time. There's a lot of short 1 to 2 minute videos that just tick off on a lot of the key functionality in the platform in terms of, in general, how it works. And then there are buyer and seller and broker and grower specific instruction videos on how some of the more detailed parts of the system work. So if you forget how to do something, there should be a video in there that helps you work out or shows you how to do it. The other part I'd like to come back to now is the registration process. So like I mentioned before, for wool growers like yourselves, it's basically a self-onboarding process, and I'll show you what that looks like. You basically just have to set up your own email address and then follow your nose through to set up your own business profile. Just give me a moment. I'll get an email address that I can use here. Gee, that one. So we put in our email address. You put in your name, password. And then there's some options here to accept the terms and conditions and so forth. Now, each of these is a link through to the particular screens. If you want to go through and read them, you can. So you tick those once you're happy that they're acceptable.
John, I'll just jump in here quickly. One of the
Sure.
questions on the Q&A, and I said we'll wait to the end, but in any case, the question is, if you've been on WoolQ, is your information transferred across? I went to register the AWTH and it says my email is in use. So how do we sign in? From what I know, thank you for letting us know. That's a bit of a glitch. We're not transferring your information across from your WoolQ. This is a totally standalone new product. But there's, I mean, in the initial stages, there's obviously some teething problems potentially, and that's, you've highlighted one. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's actually a good point because yeah, there's some ways we've got to get around that that clashing in the login. So anyway, onboarding from so I've set up the registration process. It'll send a registration email off to your email address with a verification code. So you just come back in and enter the verification code in and click on verify. And then it'll say, yes, all set up, ready to go. Welcome. So for a wool grower, you're looking at this particular part of the onboarding process. The rest of it's for sellers and buyers. So you don't need to worry about that. Getting started, you want to start up a new business profile, or you can all add, if somebody else is adding on who's already part of your business, they can come through and add on through here, but we'll just take it as read that we're starting up a new business from the start. And basically you just need to enter in your business name, email address, mobile, state, and so forth. John Wool, mobile, some of this stuff you don't, and so forth. Save the details. Whoops, put in my email address. That one. Then if there's any other people that you want to invite to be members of your profile, if you've got anybody else in your family or classes or presses or shearers or roustabouts or whatever else that you want to have access to the information, you can put their email addresses in here and it'll send off an invitation to them to come on board and become a member of your business profile as well. And then from there, it's completed. And then from here, you go through to your profile and it'll take you through to the actual platform and you can start building more information about how you set up your business profile. So you can add other things in terms of your ABN, and upload a logo and so forth. You can put gallery images from your property if you want, even promotional videos, sharing times you can put in there, and so on and so forth. And then the most important part is to come through to this brands and users part. So I'll flip out of here and I'll go back in as myself, and I'll show you how that works when we actually log into the system properly. So I'll come back in through as myself. So this is the dashboard that you hit when you're a wool grower. So I'll just explain to you just quickly how the screen's designed. So in the top left-hand corner, you'll have functionality controls. So there'll be drop-down lists and so forth. That e-learning module is accessible here as well. On the top right-hand side is where your administration controls are. So that's where you can edit your user profile and your business profile. And I'll go into that business profile bit in a bit more detail. There's a search function here, so you can search for particular pieces of information. And then there's this traceability timeline. And this is basically aims to replicate the traceability timeline that you get with Australia Post. So, you know, the parcel tracking that comes with Australia Post, it's the same sort of model where you've got touch points upon all the wool bale movements from end to end within the domestic supply chain and when they happen and the dates and times at which they happen. For growers, there's a summary down here. So as your clip information starts getting populated, there'll be a seasonal overview of your micron vehemence measurement results as a summary overview here. And then we go through to looking at more information about traceability. So in terms of information that's available, we're looking at it at 3 levels. So clip level, obviously, then mobs and sale lots. So we look at clips. So the first summary is at clip level. You can see here that this particular brand has got an e-specie attached to it. There's other statuses here to show when the information has been shipped, if there's measurements for those particular lots in that clip as well. You can then click through to the dashboard under that clip, and then you get some summary information in terms of what the mob breakdown. Now, again, this is still our test system, so there's not a lot of data in here at the moment. So some of this will be a little bit light on. But for argument's sake, you get an idea about the mob breakdowns, production in bales for that clip, what the average micron is year on year, staple strength, yield, and so forth. Then an idea against what the end uses are likely to be for your wool. Some idea about if it's going into occasion wear. There's a green light to say that that's got a high probability of that's where it's going to end up. Then we come back to the related data. So again, from the clip side of things, we can go back, you can see the lines that have been pressed out underneath that clip, or the bales again that are in those in that clip as well, and then back to the mob level as well. So it gives you that 3 level of granularity that you can interrogate your farm data. If we come back and look at the mob level, same thing again. So that's the first mob out of that clip. Again, the dashboard again showing the mob level information in terms of summaries of average bale weight, total weight, production year on year, cut per head for the mob, yields, staple strength, and so forth. So you get an idea about how that mob's performing relative to others. Again, you can come through and see all the bales have been pressed out for that mob. If there are species in there available for them, they'll be listed under there as well. And then you can come back to the clip level at the same time. And then the level above, sorry, the level below that is then obviously the sale lot level. So this will come back obviously once you've got the information coming back from your selling agent, and they've provided the connection back to you, so you can have the test certificate information flow back down. So you can see here, and you can even get some of the traceability information coming back to say that the wool's been shipped or tested and so on and so forth. If we have a look at this first lot, so this is this traceability timeline that I was talking about before. So for this particular lot, you can see when the specie, when it was shorn, when it was tested, when it was sold, when it was dumped, and when it was shipped. There's summary information here about the lot in question, and there's test certificate information as well. If the test certificate's been allowed to flow back down to you guys, you'll see the test results for that wool as well. Coming back to the related data, then you get to see the mobs that lot was created from, the bales that are in that particular sale lot, and then the species that relate to it as well. Coming back to the main page, coming through looking at sale lots, there's a search function here too. So if you're looking for a particular lot, a particular, so if you want to look at, I don't know, MF4s maybe, a particular AWIs type, you can filter it by those criteria. All these columns are sortable, ascending and descending order, so you can sort by any one of the columns as well. And there's also a filter tool in here as well, which again, you can filter the screen and change that to look at particular bale counts or micron ranges or traceability criteria that wools that have been tested or just sold or dumped and so on. So there's a fair bit of functionality in how you can slice and dice this information to make it more relevant. So that's in a nutshell, I guess, the traceability interface from a grower's perspective. There's important thing I want to concentrate on now is this business profile, because this is where you set up all these connections to your sellers. And also, like I said, add the information about your quality scheme membership, connecting to Wool Clip and so on and so forth. So I'll show you what that looks like now. So under your business profile, there's a tab that's called brand and users. So if you click on that, so this is where you can set up additional users for your business. So like I said, if there are other people in your family that you want to have access, or classes, or anybody else, you can give them access, and you can set their access at different levels. And then this brand section here is where you actually put in the definitions for each of your brands and connect them through to your selling agent. So what that looks like, I'll use this test brand 3 as an example. So So you come through, you'd set up your brand, you put your property identification code in for that brand, which is mandatory, so that has to be put in. At the moment, we're not verifying those PICs, but there is a plan when we do the phase 2 implementation that we'll go off and just check to make sure that the PIC is valid, so that somebody hasn't made a finger fumble and entered in a wrong number by mistake, because then we can't match the test certificate data back to your property because the numbers won't correlate. So you can put information in about the brand profile itself. Like I say, its location, clip size, sheep numbers, what type of flock it is, mulesing declarations, so forth as well. And then you come through to this partners and users section. And this is where you set up the selling partners connection. So in here, I want to add to a particular selling agent. Let's say we'll choose Elders for the sake of picking somebody. So you can put the account sales reference for your selling agent, who the wool rep is. Someone I know, Craig. So there, and then the receiving store, so where you're delivering your bales to. So I know he's in Goulburn. And that'll create a connection request going through to that seller. So you can see here the status is waiting for approval. So on the seller's side, they'll get a connection in this platform and also an email to say that you've identified them as being your selling agent and want to connect to them in the Traceability Hub. They'll get a connection on there and as a tick, and then that'll create the connection between you as the grower and them as the seller, so that information can be shared backwards and forwards, and then they can pass down to you the test certificate information and the order information coming back from the sellers and the exporters. The other way that'll happen is if you haven't done that at the start when you first create your profile in the Traceability Hub, the brokers themselves also have a function in which they can contact you directly from their own system and send the connection request through to you as their grower client and say, Elders have identified you as being their grower client and have asked you to connect to them in the Traceability Hub. So then you'll get an option in here that says accept or decline the connection from that selling agent. And then that again will create the connection back to them coming the other way. So there's two ways in which that connection can take place. The next tab is sustainability. So that's where we're talking about the quality scheme declarations for quality schemes you may be members of. It's simply enough to click and add a quality scheme. You can go through and choose which one is applicable. So AWS, for argument's sake, you can put in the registration code for your membership and add it in. Same again for another one. We can do, say, RWS, if I can find it. I did see it before. There we go, RWS. You put your membership number in for your RWS and then add those in as well. Make sure you save them. Again, at the moment, this information is not being verified, but we also have plans when we do the PIC verification part in phase 2 in December. We're also looking at implementing a way of verifying these memberships as well to make sure that they're current and that people haven't made a finger fumble or something other when they're putting in their membership certificate numbers. The final thing is this connection to WoolClip. So like I mentioned, those who may be using WoolClip or who plan to transition to AWTH's WoolClip platform at some stage in the future, this allows you to connect the Traceability Hub to your WoolClip platform. So what that means is that when you're using the eSpeci tool and online NWD tools that are part of WoolClip, once you finalize your wool book and send all that information off and lock it away, that information then is automatically replicated in here in the Traceability Hub for you, so you don't have to worry about it. It's all done in the background automatically. And then, like I said, the mobs and the lots details that we went through before will be available to you, and the bale information then will flow through automatically right through to the end of the supply chain. So for those who are participating in WoolClip, I highly recommend that you turn on that tool, because it'll make things a lot easier for you in terms of managing your speci data. The last thing I want to touch on is basically coming back to the start again in terms of administrative functions. Remember I mentioned about the role of the chief vet in an EAD response. So this is the tool that we use to pull out the information. As you can see, it's quite basic. The vets will provide us with the PICs, as I mentioned before, and the date of which the exposures happened, and then we'll just pull out the information through this tool and send it to them. And then they'll make a decision about how they respond appropriately based on that information. So